Welcome to the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may have missed, with your hosts AJ Kuti and Jason Gordon. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses the things that schools may not have prepared you for. As always, I'm AJ, sitting across from me, Jason. Jason, how you doing today?
Living the life, AJ. Living the life.
I hear you, man. You know, when I text you this morning and say, okay, you ready to record, you'd mentioned that you were walking your kids to school, which I then told my wife, can you imagine being able to walk your kids to school? Because for where we live, there's no way. I mean, it would take us an hour just to get to the school walking. And it must be really nice to be able to just walk them to school.
Yeah, I'm in a kind of tight community in terms of, I'd say more than half of the people at my kids' school. And luckily, I will be able to walk them to elementary, middle. You know, they're in elementary now, but middle, and even when they get in high school, they can still walk to that. So,
are they really going to want you to walk them to high school?
Well, they can walk to that. That's what I mean. So,
I was just wondering. My son right now is in high school, and I don't think he'd want me to walk him to school.
No, they're not. They're probably not going to want me to walk him to middle school, but I'm still going to be in on that one.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, no, I think that would be a ton of fun. That would be something just to be able to do every morning. That would be awesome.
Well, it's part of our routine. You know, my wife and I wake up, get them ready, get them fed, all that kind of stuff, and then we walk them down. It's exactly a half a mile. So it's a good, brisk 1 mile walk in the morning. It's great.
That's awesome. Our kids right now are doing virtual learning because it's a virtual learning day.
Ooh,
so they're at home.
I'm so sorry.
That's fun.
Yeah. I spent a year during COVID having the virtual learning thing at home. That was work.
I thought I was going to get rid of the whole virtual thing, and then, you know, and it really does show you the impact of teachers on students and being able to be there. And when you're not there, you become that teacher, you really understand the burdens that they go through in just any given day.
Oh my gosh, I don't think we fully understand it because they're dealing with all those kids, you know.
No kidding. And then you realize what your kids are like. You're like, oh my God, I hope you don't act like this in class.
Well, you know, a lot of ours was virtual, right? I could listen to the teacher and hear the other kids and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, my kid's not bad.
I agree. I look at mine and go, you know what? They're not as bad as I thought they were.
They behave better than the others. That's good.
Well, today we are going to be starting a very interesting series. And this is a series that I think I've had the most questions about personally from students. And so we decided to jump right into it. I feel like it's probably going to be a pretty popular series. And that is just our general career series, talking about careers, which is something that this is going to resonate for students that are coming out of high school, going into college, because you're going to be looking at your career and the path that you're going to take. And it's also going to be those for coming out of college, getting ready for their career, and potentially for those that are in their career now that may be looking to move.
Right.
So, and this one specifically is probably one of the ones that I know everybody that I've talked to struggles with a lot, including myself. So I'm interested to hear your take on it. And that's cover letters.
Yeah. Yep, I do a lot of teaching on cover letters, so I'm excited to go over this one. Before we jump in, though, remind everybody, visit Reschool'd.com. That's Reschool with a D, not an ED. Okay, check us out. Listen to our latest episodes. Check us out on the social media profiles, YouTube. We got, our mailbag series that we've just launched not too long ago on that. And, of course, your favorite podcasting apps. Like us, get notifications when we drop new episodes. If you like our stuff, give us that 5-star review. We'd really appreciate it. It helps us a ton. But as much as anything, get us your messages, right? Tell us what you want to hear about. You got something you want to celebrate? We'll celebrate it with you. So all those things.
And on top of that, too, when you talk about if you have any questions, if you have suggestions for quick questions, include those too, because those are the more personal ones that we get into. So if you want to know a little bit more about us, please include those, because we're pretty open. We love to talk questions that are submitted from our listeners. So we'd love to have those as well.
That might be wishful thinking, AJ. People may not think we're that interesting, right?
Yeah, both of them. Well, let's get into the quick question today. And since we're talking about cover letters and we're both in academia, let's go back to our grade the question or grade the statement or grade yourself in this situation. If you had to grade your first cover letter, so think back to your first cover letter when you were coming into your first, job, and you had to create your first cover letter, what would you give yourself as a grade for that cover letter and why?
Oh, mine wasn't very good. It was C- at best.
Dude, you haven't failed one single thing in this whole podcast so far.
Well, I tried. it's hard to fail when you do research and you try. So on things like,
Participation trophy.
right? That's what I tell my students all the time. I mean, you put in the effort, you're not going to fail. You may not achieve what you're looking for, but you're not going to fail because effort is 90% of success, or maybe more.
Agreed.
But anyway, that being said, so I tried on my first cover letter. It just wasn't very good. So C minus on that one.
Any specific things that weren't great about it?
Yeah, I just didn't know the purpose behind it very well. Now I do. We're going to talk about the purpose and everything. But the gist was I just kind of copied my resume, just kind of went backwards and kind of said, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. Well, my resume already told them that. So it was a kind of a useless thing. So anyway, but we'll get into, how you use it and its purpose and all that kind of stuff. What about you? Did you do well on your first cover letter?
I will give myself slightly higher grade in the beginning. So if I was grading it with no context, I would say it's probably a B plus, A minus.
No, that's solid.
Let me explain why. Because if you understood the context and the story behind it, then you'd probably give me an F because I cheated. I got my dad to help me with it. He was the one that really put it together, and so that's why. I mean, having him do it, it was a pretty decent one.
Yeah.
But even it fell into those same things that you just said, where it was just kind of you're restating your resume in different words, essentially. You're picking out the high points. But like I said, for the fact of me cheating on it, I'd have to give myself an F. So, but let's get into this, because I think you'd mentioned something about purpose of cover letters. I think that's probably one of the areas that is the most conflicting when it comes to looking up answers to these questions about cover letters. If you go on the internet and you try to search cover letters or good cover letters or cover letter templates or anything like that, you're going to get a lot of conflicting information. Right. So let's just start with the bare basics. And you mentioned this. What is the true purpose of a cover letter? Okay.
And I want to echo something real quick before we do. What you said about finding garbage on the internet about cover letters. Oh my gosh. Because I've had to construct a course. I mean, I teach a class session fully dedicated to an hour and a half worth of this is how you do a cover letter. What you find on the internet oftentimes is garbage, right? It's really inconsistent sometimes. Sometimes it's decent, but I've never found really a good source, right? So anyway, that being said, what's the purpose of it? Well, in a nutshell, it is to add to your resume, not to duplicate it, not to restate it, not to distract, So if you've ever taken communications, and I'd say a lot of people who are listening to this will probably take a communications course as part of their business program if you study business, right? If you study general communications, you're going to get the same thing. In business, you learn what is a persuasive and a sales message. So in a way, you construct your cover letter as a persuasive sales message. It's just what you're really selling is your benefit to the company, your attributes, how you can add value to them. And there's a structured approach to that, right? So that it fits with the resume in doing so, right? And so that's, in its essence, that's what it is. You are trying to persuade or sell your positive attributes to whoever's reading it, the potential employer.
I really thought you were about to say, and you're trying to sell yourself.
Well, I dance around that, right? You don't want to say sell yourself. Got that negative connotation, right? Don't want to go there. So, you could hear me dancing, I'm sure.
So what you're telling me is a cover letter is more of a supplement than it is used to cover up your resume or duplicate your resume.
Absolutely. And, lots of times when you apply to a job, you don't even have the opportunity to put in a cover letter. Now, I would say professional level employment, right? Post-college professional services type thing. Yeah, you're going to have the opportunity for a cover letter, but that's not always the case. And what people have done as part of the resume is they've put larger objective statements. And if, in our episode on resumes, when we go over that, we'll talk about the objective statement and things like that. But that's basically what that is. right?
Yeah.
Being able to explain what you want or what your objectives are. And if you have a cover letter, you don't need that.
When I was going through school and going through, the resume, cover letter time period of getting jobs while I was in college, because, by the way, background story, if in academia, we don't really deal with resumes a lot. We deal more with CVs. And so it's not the same. But there was a time period, obviously, when we were going through college, we had to have a resume as well. And when I was going through my resume and cover letter time period, it was really, I looked at the cover letter as the hook. I looked at it as, and I'm sure some people you've been told this before, and I don't know how much truth this is or there is in this statement, but I can see the validity in it. And that is, you have about 3 minutes to impress the person that is looking at your cover letter and resume. And so you really need to wow them quickly, whether they look at your cover letter first or your resume first. You need to wow them in the first 2-3 minutes. Otherwise, they can write you off very quickly. And so I kind of put that same effort into my cover letter when I started doing it myself to try to wow them as much. But again, I went back and looked at it as it was a form of information that can be used in lieu of my resume, not supplementary to my resume.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely had it kind of backwards when I was going through that time period.
But you are correct in that aspect of thinking of it as being somewhat of a hook, right?
Yep.
The idea that you need to get their attention and keep them engaged throughout reading. As we'll talk about in a minute, I recommend heavily that the first line be your attention-getting statement, right? There's a sales model called the AIDA model, and the A just stands for that, right? Attention-getting, grabbing someone's attention so they want to listen to you for the remainder of the message, right? And so that model plays over again because it's a persuasive message, right? So getting someone's attention up front, and I'll tell you a couple of tips I have on how to do that.
Sure. Well, let's kind of we're going to start getting into that area. One of the questions I had is there really one standard template for a cover letter, or is it various templates for different industries?
So there is, and that's what's so different from a resume. There is no template for a cover letter, period,
Okay.
Even in industries. Now, what you can ask yourself is what you're trying to do with the cover letter, okay? And that tends to be relatively common across all industries, right? You're trying to tell people what you've done. Well, that's your resume. A resume is a snapshot in history, okay? The cover letter is how you supplement that, what you want and why you want it. Those are present or forward-looking rather than backwards-looking, okay? So if you take those elements and say, all right, how do I express to somebody what I want and why I want it? Right? You can also use it, and I put a lot of focus or emphasis on this, that you are explaining things about the resume. So if you take the resume as a snapshot in history, well, you have to explain why you did some things, especially interesting people, right, that have done a lot of varied things. Explain why. How does that fit together? How did you get to where you are now in terms of this is what I want going forward? Okay, so if you understand that, then you have to know there's no template, right? Your cover letter has to be unique in a way to you, that you're explaining these things because everybody's life proceeds differently. Now, can you take a structured approach that says, all right, how am I going to do this? How am I going to tell what I want, why I want it, what I've done to get it, how it creates value for you? That type of thing. So you can move that structure around within the cover letter based upon the industry, you, the employer, that type of thing. I would definitely say a cover letter that goes to Facebook or Google is going to look a little bit different than a cover letter that goes to a traditional company like IBM or Coca-Cola.
Sure. You mentioned explaining things. So if you're an interesting person, explaining various parts of it, can you take that logic and also put it on the negative side? So, there's a lot of things that negatively can impact the look of your resume. And the biggest one I'm thinking of right now is gap in employment.
Yeah.
If you have this long-term period between working different jobs, can you use it to also explain those negative aspects of the resume?
Excellent question. Absolutely.
Okay.
Anytime you see something in your resume that's going to raise questions and people aren't going to understand it, that's going to be an opportunity for them to exclude you, right? Because what people are looking for, as much as anything, there's a myth out there that people with the best credentials always get the job. When people are looking at things in the abstract and say, all right, you went to school, you made good grades, you have some experience, blah, 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 they are looking to see that you have the minimum level of competency necessary to do the job, right? Lots of times they don't even need you to know specific stuff. That's why you can have almost any major lots of times and land jobs in almost any career as long as it's not, a certification or a very specific skill needed, right? So people are looking for that minimum level of competency. But if you've got things on there that looks varied, gaps in employment, then, all the things that we think of as negative, you change employment regularly, right? That type of thing, all things that could cause a negative perception to somebody reading it that, oh, this person's going to jump jobs from us the same way. Or what was this person doing during this time? Why are they not reporting this stuff? If they were doing anything at all, right? If they weren't doing anything at all, there had to be a reason. Otherwise, they're just lazy, right? They just didn't want to work. Or could, so what is the explanation? So yes, that is your opportunity to clear up some of those potentially negative perceptions that people will take from your resume.
Cool. I was trying to figure that because I'm a big proponent of keeping some stuff off of your resume, and we'll talk about that in a resume episode. But I was wondering, just kind of, I don't like bringing up negative stuff. I understand it's important sometimes, and especially when you're talking about a job. But I could see something like that helping getting the doubts out before you get there for maybe the interview or whatnot, or at least getting your foot in the door for the interview.
Yeah. And I will tell you this. So if you're looking at things abstractly, right, people with the best credentials will get all the jobs. That doesn't happen. You need to be able to present yourself that you meet minimum competence. But when you go in for the interview, all those stories, the negative aspects and your ability to explain them, the things that you learned from, the things that you can use to relate to somebody else during the interview, that's gold. Those are the things that show person to person fit, person to organizational culture fit, right? It shows understanding, growth, that type of thing. It will help you relate to the other person. And ultimately, people are doing the hiring, right? It's a people decision. And that's why you so often see people who do not have the best credentials or things like that get the job over others simply because they relate to either the person that's doing the hiring, and that's number one, that's most important, but two, they present themselves in a way that looks like they fit well into the company culture. And
yeah, I can attest to that because have you ever been hired somewhere and you've been working and you see the people that you're working around, and then at some point you see how great everybody else is around you, and you think, how in the world did I get hired here?
Well, one thing I do see, and I've actually done some research into this as far as legal writing. That aspect, we've all heard of the negative aspect of implicit bias. And if you haven't, it's basically our tendency to gravitate towards people like us, right? If you have that, we have this deep ingrained thing that we need to communicate easily with others. That keeps us from getting eaten by a grizzly bear or something like that, right?
It's kind of deep.
I just throw that out there, right? And as
Old
we were
times,
developing as human beings in society, right? You needed to be able to communicate easily. You needed to understand the other person. So we have this natural tendency socially to want to understand other people and want to be understood, right? So, when we talk about networking and things like that, I talk a lot about the desire to be understood, and that's what makes you close to somebody, right? People feel like they understand you. So anyway, that being said, back to the whole, resume cover letter thing, people hire with that implicit bias in mind that you tend to gravitate towards people that are like you, because you believe that they'll understand you. You believe you have a better appreciation for their values, beliefs, interests, things like that. So anyway, what happens is the negative impact that most people study is, well, if I'm a white male, I'm more likely to gravitate towards or feel a fit with another white male. And then ultimately the hiring decision, while it's not intentional, right? I may gravitate towards, like I say, the person who's like me. Now, you say, well, that goes across the board. Wouldn't a African American female, for example, be in the same boat? Wouldn't she be more likely to hire somebody similar to her? Yes, but then you look at historical practices of prejudice and who's the majority or the predominant majority in most industries in the workforce, and it is because of historical prejudices and practices against women and minorities, white males, right? So anyway, that's what I researched. But the interesting part of it was it gave me a lot of insight into understanding, the hiring process and what people look for and why people go for that. So if you understand that, you now have a context of what you're trying to do with the cover letter and the resume, right? And then ultimately in the interview, right, reinforce that and show that you have that level of fit with the other individual that you're interviewing with and with the organizational culture.
Well, how wise is it, or is it wise at all, to be creative in your cover letter? Like, and the reason I bring this up, and I've got one specific thought. If I was, me being in accounting, if I was going to create a cover letter and resume, but cover letter specifically for this episode, creativity is not what I need for accounting. We've talked about this many times. You go to jail for creativity in accounting. But if I'm talking about something like marketing, where you're trying to sell stuff and you use a lot of creativity to sell different products or services or whatever, creativity can add value to how a company can look at you. They can look at you as being more creative, or maybe thinking outside the box, maybe even testing the boundaries a little bit in certain things, and that could add value to the way they see you. Or at least, again, that's in my logic. Would you agree with that, or is it something that I'm just flawed in seeing?
No, I can agree with that. Actually, I honestly don't have a ton to add in that way. If you're in an industry where creativity is not valued, well, you're going to go light on creativity, right? If you are in an industry where creativity is highly desired, like if you see a posting for a creative writer, for example, right? A staff writer or somebody, oftentimes you see a description in there as being a good storyteller. Now, do you want to have a cover letter that's very stodgy and doesn't really do a good job? I do a good bit of writing. And one thing I always try to go for is that when people are reading it, is it causing that image bubble in their mind? Can they visualize it as they're reading it? And, that's, when I really first started writing in college, I'd written something and it was actually my life history up until that point, like how I grew up and stuff like that. And I gave it to people in my class that, it was a writing class, and I gave it to them. And the first thing that someone said to me was, "Oh my God, I can actually see this. I can imagine it the entire time that I'm reading it."
You can smell the farm.
Right. Yeah. They said I'm getting a mental picture all the way through of what was happening. And that stuck with me. Right. And you can do the exact same thing in a cover letter, right? The person can read it and get a mental image of you.
Yeah.
Right. They put together, and that's the best thing in the world if you in some way relate to them. And also that mental image is in some way relevant to their past in a way, right? And that's why I tell people when they're networking, it's important. You go to networking events, it's really important to research who's going to be there, right? That type of thing. And if you're going to network specifically with someone, to know things about them, right? That can help you a lot.
Well, let's get into the big piece. I think most people are going to want to hear probably what they came here for. Because they're probably in a position where they're trying to get a cover letter together, or they're thinking about it in the near future. Let's talk about the important pieces of what should be included in a cover letter. I mean, we talked about a standard template, and there's probably a pseudo template, I guess you will. I mean, obviously there's going to be variety in it, but there's kind of a template in a sense. So let's talk about those important pieces. What are some pieces that you would include in a cover letter?
Okay, so when I teach this, and this is my method, right? So when I teach it,
proprietary,
right? Yeah, I guess, but proprietary, so I can share it with the world.
There you go.
The first step is you want to get their attention in a way that tells them that you are looking for a job. I mean, the first line of any cover letter is you're introducing yourself. Dear sir, madam, whatever. And you say, I was interested in learning about this position, or I'm applying to this position because, right? How do you say, I want a job in the first line or two, but do it in an engaging way? Let me ask you, can you think of a way to say, I want a job in an engaging way?
What came to my mind was, I'm broke and I need a job.
All right. So you're in the creative side of things, right? Now, I don't know if you want to throw that out for a finance
Probably
position, right?
Yeah, that's probably not a good position to throw that one into.
I'm broke.
Yeah.
Credit score's a mess.
But let me help you with your finances.
Part of my job will be handling petty cash, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I don't think you want to throw that out there. Just like in the interview, you don't want to, show up drinking a Bud Light or something like that, right?
Well, unless you're applying to Bud Light.
Exactly. Maybe that works for you, right?
No, I mean, usually my go-to is, please accept this cover letter and resume on my behalf as interest in the position that I'm trying to go for, whatever that position is. And it's usually too, in my opinion, it's usually almost too formal because it's not something I would naturally say. And when I write, I try to keep it in natural speaking terms. So I write as I speak. And so having something that formal is definitely not in character for me because I definitely don't speak like that.
And that serves the initial objective of saying, "Hey, I'm applying for this job," right? Yeah. But once again, it's probably not terribly creative in terms of grabbing their attention, right? Sure. So one I like to tell students about is if you've done your homework, meaning you've done your background research about the company, you've read about the company, you've probably tried to network or ask questions of someone at the company. The best thing you can possibly do is to create some kind of social contract or moral obligation for this person to continue reading your resume and read it closely. Now that I've given you that hint, what do you think you can do? What can you say to that person that will cause them to think, oh, I really should read the rest of this, or I really better read the rest of this?
I'd probably include more information about why. Like, I'm a graduating student that is, I hate when you put me on the spot like this. I'm a graduating student that is either interested or I am applying for this position for this reason, and I feel like I would be a good fit in your company, and my credentials and or my evidence as to this is to follow, and then that's kind of where I would explain everything else.
Okay, that's good. You're right, because in a message, you're supposed to provide an outline, right? Give people an expectation of what they're going to see, and you give them that up front so they know what they're looking for and they know what you're going to do in the cover letter. That's not bad at all. Let me throw something out there to you. What if you know something about the person, you've done your LinkedIn research or whatever, and you know that you've identified the person who's going to be interviewing you, you've looked at their background profile, and you see that they went to the same school as you, or that they're from the same hometown or same state or something like that, or have some common interest. Now, is there a way of something you could say in that opening statement there, innocuously, not identifying the exact person, but that could, again, create some type of sense of moral obligation to continue reading?
I mean, when you were kind of talking about that, I was thinking, okay, it'd be interesting if the person interviewing you, for my instance, if the person interviewing me or looking at my cover letter resume graduated from UGA, I would probably include something that says I'm a UGA graduate, and then here's the other stuff.
Beautiful.
I would include that in there.
Because what you've done is they have now painted a picture in their mind of themselves in your position. Yep. They can relate. They were in your position, at least somewhat, at some point in time as a student at a location. They can imagine you going to the same classes or walking the same campus. All of a sudden, they are slightly more interested and say, well, what was this guy like in college, right? What is this person's background? Are they like me? Are they different than me? Another way to go about doing it is lots of times, your senior people that you're applying to might be older than you with more experience and things like that. What if they have kids?
Yeah.
And the kids have a specific interest, right? If you can figure out this stuff, and I hate to say that you're stalking that hard, but people put the information out there. If they're interested and they play the guitar, right? I mean, that's an interest set that you all of a sudden you can pipe into. And here's one that if you are able to identify people at the company, you're able to talk to people at the company, that first statement is, I'm applying for this position. I was super interested when I learned about it and spoke with AJ Kuti in your so-and-so department. He explained to me blah, 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 blah. Now, if I'm reading that, if I know you in the organization, I have to read the rest of that resume and cover letter, and I have to read it very closely and well. Why? You might stop by and ask me, right?
Yeah.
If you're a friend of mine or an acquaintance of mine, I don't want to, when you come by and ask me, did you read this person's resume and cover letter, for me to say, yep, but I didn't really read it closely, right?
Yeah.
You want to say, yes, I read through it well, and I know the candidate. I actually, now, if you can make that reference, that person is going to show me favoritism. They are naturally going to look to see that I meet minimum qualifications. That's why referrals are so important. It's almost like a subtle referral just by me saying that I spoke with you about the position. Now, if it happens to be somebody higher up in the organization, the vice president of whatever, or the CEO or something like that, and you say, after speaking with them, I was referred to the position by them, blah, 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 they're going to read every word and they're going to read it well, because they do not want to hurt their own career prospects, right? Somebody's has the hiring function as one of their obligations, and then what if that higher up comes by and says, did you read so-and-so's resume? They don't want to answer the question of, nope, right? I mean, that just looks terrible. So anyway, that opening statement, that first 2 lines really, is going to grab their attention and create some kind of social contract or moral obligation to continue reading the rest of the cover letter. That's the first step, the start to a good cover letter. Okay. Step 1.
Now, listeners, I want to preface something right quick. We didn't plan on him asking me questions, clearly, by the babbling I did when he did ask me that question. I was put on the spot and had no idea it was going to happen.
And I'm going to keep doing it, AJ. Sorry about that.
Please don't do
buddy.
this. I haven't done a resume in forever.
Right. All right. So we started with a resume. You've got it over to your side. And a resume, unlike a CV, a resume is generally 1 page, right? So you can hold it in that one hand, and the cover letter needs to be 1 page, so you can hold it in the other hand, right? And you can look at them together same time. You're reading down the cover letter, glancing over at the resume real quick, because if you look at hiring practices, employers don't look at them very long, right? And you've got them both in one hand, no page flipping, no nothing. You're looking back and forth. It makes it easy. That cover letter, that first line, grab their attention. They want to continue reading. Second part, you need to answer the question, and really quickly, why you want to work for this company. Because that is
this has to go. This has to go back with you doing your homework on the company itself.
Exactly, and that's one of those reasons that there is no standard template for a cover letter.
Yeah,
every company's different. Every department of a company is different. So you have to do that background research, and you have to explain to them really quickly, look, here's my attention-getting statement. I want a job. But if you're going to say I want a job, you got to say why.
Yeah.
And once again, you need to know things about the company, like what are their values? What's going on with them? What is their mission? Things like that. Now, luckily, there's one easy place where you can find out that stuff about any company.
Yes, the About page.
The About page on their website.
Yep.
They put that stuff out there and they brag about it. And I will tell you this, there's this psychological tendency for us to believe other people know or understand what we know or understand. Same thing happens when you go to work for a company. Like you and I work for the same college, right?
Mm-hmm.
We tend to keep it in our mind that other people outside in the community know about our college. They understand about our college or know something about it. But it becomes increasingly apparent when you start talking to people away from campus, telling them where you work and what you do, they don't know much about the college oftentimes,
We actually heard something about that in a faculty meeting the other day.
Right, yeah. I mean, that type of thing. So, in our college, is still growing. It's kind of stabilized now, but It needs to do a little bit better job of communicating its message out there, I will say, and it's
Yeah.
working on that. It definitely is. But that
And we
being
are we're relatively new too for a college. We're like in the infantile age of a college. I mean, we were the first charter college in the 21st century.
right, and what, 12 years old or 13 years
Yeah.
old now?
Yeah.
So that being said, we make these suppositions, but it's not true. Okay, so
Yep.
we need to make certain that when we're applying, we need to show the person that we understand those things, right? And that's what can separate us from the other applicants. When we say,
Sure.
I want to work at your place of employment because, right? You are all of a sudden captivating them, say this person understands. You're all of a sudden establishing that fit that we were talking about earlier, that connection. They can see you in this position because, once again, you recognize the values, you recognize the nature of the company. Okay. So that was step 2. You've got to answer that question. Step 1, get their attention by saying, I want a job. Step 2, here's why I want the job. I'm going to tell you, show you that I understand and know about the company, the culture, the fit, that type of thing. Step 3, now is your opportunity to explain the why about yourself. So the resume is a snapshot in history, right? And in networking, in communicating with others about you, you want them to understand what you want, why you want it, and what you've done to get it. Your resume tells them what you've done to get it. But now it is your opportunity to elaborate on that and say, as you can see in my resume, I did I have experience in. You don't repeat your resume, you just make reference to it. As you can see in my resume, I've done a lot of work in this area. Okay.
Sure.
Why? My interest in marketing, or my interest in education, or my interest in medicine, or whatever, comes from ... Okay. It has been my blah blah blah. Right. I'm just filling in the blanks that the resume does not tell you about. The why about me. Why did I do these things? And you can slowly transition that. This is your longer paragraph. This is a 7 to 10 line paragraph. When you say, as you see in my resume, and then you explain yourself, slowly transition that into why this is of value to you. Why what I've done is of value to you. How it will be a benefit at the company. If you can do that, once again, you're making it that persuasive type of message, not just informative, persuasive. The person can see you in the job. They believe they fit with you. And again, you're telling them why this is of value to them, why you will bring value. Now, I caution you, never say you want to change things. The only person who gets hired to change things is the top executive.
Yep.
Everybody else just adds value. So remember that, right? You're explaining why about yourself and how what you've done will add value to them. There you go. That's step 3.
Makes sense. And would you say that is the paragraph that you would include explaining any discrepancies in your resume?
Yes.
Or is there another paragraph? Okay, so if you include that. So the reason I asked that question is I'm a firm believer of you always start with the goods first. You want to put your best foot forward first. So you always want to start with positives and then have the discrepancies towards the end, maybe the last line or two, just to say, hey, the reason, obviously you would use better words, but more or less the reasons why I had a gap year or the reasons why I don't have a ton of experience in this specific area is because of this. And this is how I can compensate for that. This is how, again, even though I have a deficiency, I can compensate for that deficiency because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. And you don't want to get into too much. You don't want to bring up your deficiencies.
Oh,
right?
Of course. Yeah. I was one, maybe.
It's more you only do that if there are glaring things. Yep. So if you've presented yourself the positives well, you've done your job of getting the interview. Now, in the interview, that's when you're going to use stories about your life and all these things to, clear up any misunderstandings or any gaps or alleviate any worry.
Yep.
But now, like I say, in a sales message, I like to tell people like this. If I'm selling a product to you, I don't bring up the negative attributes and try to explain them away.
Yeah. Unless they're obvious.
Yep. I just beat up on these are the positive attributes. This is how it's going to change your life. This is the value it brings to you because you're important. This is why it works like this. So you can see how that sales message is coming into the cover letter. Okay, so once you've done that in this middle paragraph, right, that really everything, I want a job and this is why I want it, is paragraph 1. Paragraph 2 is this slightly longer aspect of the why about me and how that adds value to you. Now, the last paragraph, this is optional, okay, but I highly encourage it because, again, it's that thing about what you want and why you want it. You can take the next step of saying, this is what I want in the future, not just now, but going forward. You can say, here are my aspirations. And never say, I want to be CEO or I want to, and
I want to take your job.
More than anything else, don't say you want to ultimately achieve something that doesn't exist in this company.
Sure.
I had that happen when I was on a hiring committee one time. Somebody who had a referral from a current employee, and she was interviewing, and I asked her, I said, well, what's your aspiration? What do you want? And she told me something that didn't exist. Like that was not a possibility for her career-wise at our organization.
Yeah.
And I was like, you do realize that that's not a possibility here. Like that's not commensurate with his career track. It doesn't even exist here to do that. And they were like, oh, well, yeah, blah, blah, blah. So what they told me was they weren't going to stay long term. And so anyway, that person didn't get the job, obviously, for that and a bunch of other reasons. But that being said, so if you're going to say what you aspire to, I recommend you looking up 2 promotions.
Yep.
And say, that's what I aspire to. Okay? Because oftentimes you're applying to the person who holds that position. There's a number of psychological tendencies that come into play there that says, look, I want to be like you. I want to follow your footprint. I want to follow in your steps, right? But also, I've done my research. I know it exists in the company. The person reading this says, well, all right, I see myself. I was in your position at one time. I am along your career path. You want the same things as me. This is what I'm doing, right? I relate to you well. All of a sudden, they're putting themselves in your position and they can see themselves in you. And that is huge for, once again, getting that interview, taking the next step to get securing the job.
Well, you know, it's interesting hearing you talking about this. One of the areas that I like, and I've said this before in a previous episode, one of the areas that I feel like I excel the most in the hiring process is the interview. I love the interviews. I understand the interviews, and I'm just comfortable in interviews. It sounds to me, the more and more that you talk, that a cover letter is almost a preemptively way to answer common interview questions, because a lot of stuff that you said, I've heard in the interview process. So you're really just answering before the interview process. For like that, for example, that last paragraph that you were just talking about, that is really your answer to where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Absolutely.
Or 10 years?
A lot of the same things are done in the interview that are done in this pre-process. The thing about this pre-process, it's so important is because this is your ticket to the dance, right? Yeah. If you don't do this well, you're not going to get the invite. And there will always be people with a better resume than you.
Yeah.
There will always be. And that being said, if we just selected things on what people had in their past resume, well, there would only ever be one interview for one person for the job, right? People are trying to fill everybody out, and you've got your resume, you meet minimum requirements to do the job. Now you need to set yourself apart. Make them excited about interviewing you. Well, 1, make them want to interview you, but 2, make them excited to learn more about you and stuff. And that sets the stage for the interview. That's what takes you to the next level, and that's what's going to help you get the job. So it's a little more than just your ticket to the dance. It's also setting the stage as to this is what you can expect of me.
Yeah, I would almost argue that the cover letter and the resume, those 2 aspects will never get you a job.
No, that is true.
They will.
Yes.
They will get you your foot in the door so you can get an interview that will help you get the job. But they will not get you the job. However, they will not get you the job. Yes. They will be the piece that will be the nail in the coffin that means that you will not get that job.
And in our stuff on interviewing, we talk about that a little bit about,
I can't wait for that episode. I love that one.
This is the stuff that will get you not hired. These are the things you have to avoid. Okay. So you see here how the cover letter, really, it's an art form. So in our steps, you've gotten somebody's attention. You've made yourself fit in their mind by telling them you understand the company. You've explained about yourself and how that adds value to them and the company. And then all of a sudden you say, this is what I want, right? This is my aspirations, and it's to be like you. I want to follow in your foot. I want to be great like you. You can even add on to it. My favorite phrase is, I want to learn and grow, right? You never want to change things. I want to learn and grow from a group of consummate professionals like yourselves. Right?
That sounds like a bunch of smoke you're blowing up.
I know, doesn't it? But man.
But they eat it up.
Yeah, well, they eat it up, because here's the thing. There's nothing more flattering than telling somebody you want to be like them. There's nothing more flattering than asking somebody their advice on something because you want to follow in their footsteps. Asking somebody to be your mentor, right? That is a strong tool. Even if you don't believe that they have much to offer you, right, in terms of being your mentor, asking them for their advice and their mentorship and stuff like that is your way to create some emotional indebtedness. You ask somebody that, they will do things for you. They will reach out to employers on your behalf. They will write you reference letters. They will turn you on to opportunities, right? They take some ownership now of your success. And, right, so, there's that psychological tendency out there. You want somebody to do something for you. Reciprocity is not the most effective way. That idea of I do something for you, so you do something for me. No. Get somebody to do something for you. Then build them up for it. Brag on them. Make them feel appreciated. Make them feel like they really, and because they will now not want to fall from grace, they will not want to lose your approval. They will continue to work tooth and nail, right, to help you to maintain that level of, right, admiration, to stay in your good graces. So anyway, the same thing applies here. Like, there's a lot of psychology in this whole sales process.
Well, listeners, I want to put this out there. Jason is the best co-host I've ever had. He does everything that he needs. I'm trying to build him up so that way. No, this has been an incredible episode, and I wish I would have had this when I was going through college, because this is something that I tended to struggle with. Resumes were a little bit better for me, but the cover letters were the parts that I struggled. And having it broken down the way you did, I think really helps me understand it in its pieces and also its purpose. And that, I think, is going to help a lot of listeners use it for what it is really supposed to be. And so I've enjoyed this episode.
Me too.
Did you have any? Go ahead.
I mean, that's what we're here for, right? We're trying to help people out. And if we can give them a hard skill of creating a cover letter or just an understanding of how it works, we've done our job.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. Jason, any parting words before we head out?
Just remind everybody, hit us up on the website, Reschool'd.com. Hit us up on the social media handles. Let us know what you're thinking about, what you want to hear about, because that's what we want to talk about. We're here for you.
Awesome. Well, until next time, we hope to see you there. Goodbye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Reschool'd podcast. Be sure to head over to Reschool'd.com for news and other information on things we're getting into.